There are two companies left in America, those that have intellectual property that have been hacked and know it, and those who have intellectual property that have been hacked and don't know it.
Right now, there are secrets being stolen.
Absolutely, positively, I would bet my life on it.
Everything you can possibly imagine, we have seen the Chinese make a concerted effort to steal that information and use it for their own economic advantage.
I'm afraid it's going to take the equivalent of an electronic plane flying into a building before people take this seriously.
There is a new target for America's competitors. For decades, they coveted our military secrets. Today, they also want our trade secrets. And experts at the highest levels of government agree. Cyber espionage, the Chinese threat, is the most significant economic security concern facing American business. Every day, a force from the Far East has a singular mission: to steal the secrets of American business. Intellectual property, blueprints for existing and emerging technologies, research and development advances, and merger and acquisition opportunities. All of it sought and much of it taken as part of a state-sponsored effort by the Chinese to gain and maintain economic superiority. What is the worst-case scenario here?
We continue to bleed our intellectual property to the point where we just cannot compete with other countries, China specifically. Now they can compete directly in, say, cars and consumer products and durable goods and non-durable goods, most of which is stolen from the United States, that research and development. We lose that edge to future prosperity for the United States. It's that serious.
No business is safe, no industry immune. Many have lost valuable secrets, but because so few corporations admit to having been breached and often have no idea what's been stolen, the cost to American firms is impossible to pinpoint.
Needs to understand this threat and take this seriously.
As a senior agent in the FBI's Cyber Crimes Division, Sean Henry has seen firsthand the damage that's been done.
We had one company just recently, they lost 10 years worth of R&D worth $1 billion virtually overnight.
It's what's known in intelligence jargon as an advanced persistent threat. The Chinese are attacking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constantly probing the computer networks of American businesses for weaknesses that can be exploited, and devoting huge resources to help them sift through what they steal.
In my opinion, there's no Fortune 500 company they can't break into. If they want in, they're in.
Brian Shields, a car-loving computer security specialist, would rather be cruising in his 1968 Camaro than tracking down spies.
It's a hot rod by every definition.
But as a frontline combatant in one of the early skirmishes of what is today an all-out cyber war, Shields was forced to confront an enemy that corporate America is only now waking up to. Shields believes Chinese cyber spies cost him his job and are threatening to steal other Americans' livelihoods as well.
How does a company in a short period, 8 to 9 years, suddenly go out of existence? Unfair competition. You can't deny this. It's clear.
Shields' story begins 8 years ago, when as an IT security expert for the giant telecom equipment company Nortel, he stumbled on an intruder in the company's internal computer network. Log-on information and at least 7 passwords had been stolen, allowing intruders remote access to a trove of Nortel's secrets. Do you remember your reaction at that?
Yeah, my eyes bulged, yeah. This is really bad. Indeed, this was a major exfiltration that had occurred.
Nortel Networks is building the new high-performance internet.
A success story from the early internet age, Nortel made the equipment that helps send information around an increasingly networked world. Now, it was a victim of that world, as hackers brazenly went right to the top of its chain of command.
So not only do they have a senior executive president, now we have also the CEO of the company's account being used. And immediately it's like, well, how did their accounts get compromised?
Shields, along with a handful of IT experts, worked the case for 2 months, tracking the hackers' movements on the network, trying to determine exactly how they got in, what they had taken, and where they came from.
One of the things that's actually tracked is the originating IP address as well. And this was coming out of Asia. It's 60.2.251.8. And these are the bad guys.
But beyond knowing the internet address, registered in Shanghai, Shields maintains Nortel's management wasn't interested in getting answers to a cyber threat few companies had ever encountered. After changing the passwords on the 7 compromised accounts, the case was put on the shelf. But not for Shields.
I never let go of it. I never let go of it.
Shields continued the investigation on his own, convinced the Chinese were still spying on Nortel and had been long before the 2004 incident.
How many years were the Chinese hacking into Nortel?
At least 10 years.
Excuse me?
At least 10 years. As far back as my log records went, which was the year 2000. And
a decade?
Yes.
How is that possible?
It's very easy. We didn't detect this stuff.
The closest Shields ever got to proving Chinese hackers were still camping out in Nortel's network was late 2008, after he analyzed the CEO's internet activity.
There was actually something there that jumped out at me. In the middle of his Yahoo session, he suddenly had some traffic go over to Beijing. And it didn't fit in with his browsing pattern, the stuff that he was looking at. It didn't belong there.
And nearly 5 years after the first detected breach, Shields made a final effort to bring attention to the problem, writing a 14-page letter to the CEO.
The Chinese are still in your network. We never really rid them out. I personally would not trust anything you do on your computer, as it is extremely likely it's being monitored.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind they were monitoring him.
Nortel, once valued at over $250 billion and employing nearly 100,000 people, filed for bankruptcy in 2009.
Do you think Nortel's bankruptcy in part was caused by the spying of the Chinese?
Oh, absolutely. How can you compete when you got foreign adversary, a competitor who's basically getting hand-felled everything that you're doing? They can know your sales, they can know your costing, they can know your business plans, they know your R&D, they're stealing it, they don't even have to pay for the R&D, they just take it.
When it comes to this opinion, you're out there kind of alone. I mean, the general consensus on Nortel is it expanded enormously, it piled up some debt on its balance sheet, it executed poorly, it made poor acquisitions. It has nothing to do with Chinese.
That's not true. Circumstantial evidence. Look again.
Shields points to the fact that a little-known Chinese telecommunications company called Huawei was on the rise. At the same time, Nortel was failing.
Huawei didn't start selling on the international market until the year 2000. That coincidentally is when our downslide really started to kick into gear. We started having our major layoffs in around 2000.
But your contention is that Huawei was benefiting from the spying that was going on by the Chinese?
Yes, circumstantial evidence says they were benefiting directly, absolutely.
Huawei denies all allegations of spying, saying the company has a strong history of respecting the intellectual property of others. But Shields believes otherwise.
It's not like we've had other competitors, from Russia or France or suddenly come into the picture of the fray that are doing much better. They're all struggling. I mean, the ones that are out there, who's benefiting from this? I'm sorry, the circumstantial evidence is very strong.
Coming up, China sets its sights on an American giant.
We suddenly realized that even the best companies with tremendously smart people, great security, are vulnerable to this threat.
When cyber espionage, the Chinese threat, continues.
So what we see here is a real live command and control tool. This is what the operators in China were using to control the victim machines.
When it comes to hackers, Dmitry Alperovich is one of the good guys.
This could be going on while I'm doing my work.
You would see nothing on your screen. It's completely happening in the background, transparently to you.
Alperovich makes it his business to know what the bad guys in cyberspace are up to. During his career, he has seen a dramatic shift in tactics.
In the last 4 or 5 years, I've been really focused on the nation-state threat, particularly the threat coming from China. Chinese are hacking every company imaginable out there, stealing all of their intellectual property, negotiation information, everything they need to capture business, capture market share.
Do you recall a specific time when you suddenly woke up to the threat of the Chinese?
Operation Aurora, which was an attack on Google, I think was a watershed moment where we suddenly realized that even the best companies with tremendously smart people, great security, are vulnerable to this threat.
Cybersecurity is front and center once again. This time, Google is disclosing a hacker attempt on its Gmail accounts.
While Google grabbed the headlines, corporate America was under siege. Chinese cyber spies were systematically targeting at least 24 other companies using a flaw in Microsoft's Internet Explorer. That flaw allowed access, a so-called backdoor, into companies' networks once a user clicked on a deceiving web link. It's what's known as a zero-day vulnerability. While the Google attack was publicized as an attempt by the Chinese government to hack into the Gmail accounts of Chinese dissidents, Alperovich, leading the investigation into the security breaches of more than a dozen other companies, says the aggressors were after something much more valuable.
Did they get access to the source code at Google, the so-called DNA of the company in some way?
There's no question that they got access to very sensitive systems within Google.
The attack on Google, exploiting that flaw in Internet Explorer, was simple but effective. It began, Alperovich says, with an instant message.
All right, so an instant message is sent impersonating somebody the recipient knows. And what happens then?
They click on a link, and that's it. That's all they have to do. So the page doesn't open up because there are no actual photos, and they move on and decide that something just wasn't working right. In reality, their machine has just been taken over. Completely in silent manner, malicious software was dropped into their machine. You see nothing on your desktop. You continue doing your job as you normally would, and someone is right now browsing your file system, downloading key documents.
One click, and the Chinese had breached Google. The attackers could then use the compromised computer as a beachhead for further incursions into the network. Google wouldn't talk to us about the breach, but it is one of the few U.S. companies to even admit a breach took place.
Unfortunately, that's the situation today, where there are two types of companies, those that know they've been hacked, those that don't yet know, and those that know aren't speaking.
Although Google said publicly the attack originated from China, the full extent of what was taken has never been disclosed. And Alperovich believes it's the unknown that makes this threat so dangerous.
When someone steals your intellectual property, it's not like they stole your car. You still have your intellectual property. Someone else just has a copy of it. It takes years to build up the factories, the expertise to really understand what you've taken and reproduce it. It's been going on for 5-6 years. The question is, do we have another 5-6 years, 10 years, or are we at the end of this rope here where they've taken so much that we're now going to see aggressive competition across entire sectors of our economy?
For Alperovich, an immigrant who became an American citizen just 7 years ago, the Chinese cyber threat is personal.
This country did a lot for me, and I'm just very angry about what is happening now to this country, where all of our value, essentially, which is in this knowledge-based economy, the intellectual property, is getting taken, falling off the trucks of these companies, and no one is doing anything about it.
Leaving U.S. companies virtually defenseless against a relentless and nimble aggressor.
We are in combat with a host of adversaries.
Coming up, the company hired to protect is attacked.
The employees within RSA that opened the emails, almost no one would have not opened that email.
So, David, this is one of our demonstration centers. You're almost under constant attack. And even breaches happen on a fairly regular basis. It's just a question of duration and time and severity.
With each passing year, the Chinese cyber threat has become bolder and better organized. Nothing reflects that more than the 2011 attacks against RSA, a company that gets paid to protect corporation secrets. Only a year after Operation Aurora, RSA and some of its clients were the target of a well-coordinated spying operation by the Chinese.
RSA, one of the leaders in security, if they can't defend themselves, and again, I've argued that no one really can defend themselves, I don't fault RSA, but if they can't defend themselves, who can?
Our adversaries are better coordinated, have developed better intelligence, and easily outflank traditional perimeter defenses.
Art Coviello is executive chairman of RSA.
Collectively, people in our line of work have been going through hell in the last 12 months since we last met. And yes, because we at RSA were attacked last March.
That attack originated at another company that RSA did business with.
That organization's email server was then used to send emails directly to us. The employees within RSA that opened the emails thought they were getting a legitimate email from a legitimate company. Almost no one would have not opened that email.
This time, the cyber bomb was a seemingly normal Microsoft Excel document. But within that was an Adobe file that spread malicious software onto the user's computer, enabling the attackers to not only control that computer, but use it to further advance onto RSA's network, all with the direct aim of stealing valuable data.
and then it was a race against time to understand where we were compromised before we could turn them out. As soon as we found all the places where we were compromised, we turned them out, but not before they extracted the Secure ID information.
Secure ID, RSA's product for enhanced IT security, is best known as the key fob used by millions to access their company's computer systems remotely. The key fob generates random codes every 60 seconds, serving as one of 2 passwords that grant access to an employer's corporate network. This level of security is known as two-factor authentication, and it serves millions of customers worldwide, including government defense contractors.
There's widespread belief that the Chinese were after information on how to reverse engineer that system and essentially use it not to compromise RSA itself, but to use that information to compromise defense contractors and government agencies that are using RSA's technology.
We were literally within hours of stopping the attack altogether. But forensically, we were able to determine, again, within hours exactly what was taken. But more important, we were able to go public quickly enough to give our customers the ability to mitigate the risk.
At the time, Coviello stated, the information extracted does not enable a successful direct attack on any of our RSA Secure ID customers. But since the attack, one RSA customer has reported a breach. Defense contractor Lockheed Martin, best known for its unrivaled fighter jets.
We worked diligently with Lockheed on these same mitigating capabilities. Nothing was lost from Lockheed. And that's the only known attack we have that's been reported using the information that was stolen.
Lockheed Martin says it detected the May 2011 attack almost immediately and took aggressive actions to protect all systems and data. Still more than a year later, while others blame China, RSA is reluctant to point fingers.
Our focus was really not on who, but how to protect ourselves and then how to mitigate any potential damage to our customers. So we didn't have the ability to point the finger at China or anyone else. However, due to the sophistication of the attack, we were quite sure it was a nation.
You were sure early on it was a nation state, but
Yes.
not certain that it was China?
Absolutely.
We are seeing a great deal of DoD-related equipment stolen by the Chinese. I can't go into the specifics here.
National Security Agency Director Keith Alexander has no qualms about labeling China as the aggressor.
There are some very public ones, though, that give you a good idea of what's going on. The most recent one, I think, was the RSA exploits.
Coming up, fighting back.
This is stealing American wealth. It's stealing American jobs. It's stealing American competitive advantage. We should go out there and defend ourselves.
The leadership of those organizations don't necessarily take it seriously. Once they get bitten, at that time it may be too late.
When cyber espionage, the Chinese threat, continues.
This is stealing American wealth. It's stealing American jobs. It's stealing American competitive advantage. We should go out there and defend ourselves.
If anyone understands the danger of the Chinese cyber threat, it is General Michael Hayden. As the former director of both the National Security Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency, Hayden warns the time to confront this threat is now.
And it's going to be harder for us to do than it may be for some other societies because of this great sensitivity with regard to privacy.
While he fully admits the U.S. engages in spying, Hayden distinguishes it from the type pursued by the Chinese.
We steal things that are valuable and useful for your security, for your liberty, and for your safety. There are a few other nations out there who share that view, but there are a whole bunch of other states out there who steal for profit, who steal for commercial advantage. We don't, they do.
And China's aggressive effort in cyber espionage is driven in part, say China experts like Adam Siegel, by its history.
They suffered colonialism and bullying from the big powers, and so they want to make sure that they're not dependent on the West for critical technologies.
Siegel, a senior research fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, says China's biggest fear is falling behind technologically and watching its torrid economic growth slow as a result.
What's going on now is really these economic and political incentives to try and move up the value chain, to move from made in China to innovated or invented in China. So that means if you're a Chinese company and you're looking for funding, it's very easy to go to the government and say, oh yes, we can do this Intel microprocessor, we'll reverse engineer it, we'll produce something very similar to that. And so you work on stealing on that.
Which means American corporations will keep bleeding intellectual property to the Chinese, bringing increased competition and lost jobs. China is unwavering in its rebuttal of allegations of cyber espionage.
在没有进行充分的调查。
Hang Lei is China's foreign ministry spokesman. He says, quote, without adequate investigation and without further evidence, accusing China of carrying out cyber attacks against U.S. companies is not only unprofessional, but also irresponsible. Irresponsible or not, U.S. companies continue to be under a cyber siege. And those attacks, experts and insiders tell me, originate most often in China. Awareness of the threat is growing, but so is the sophistication of the attackers. And many companies remain one mouse click away from disaster. If the U.S. response to Chinese cyber espionage remains disjointed, experts like General Hayden warn the consequences will be dire.
We stay disorganized. We continue to lose jobs. We continue to lose competitive advantage. If we don't fix it, something catastrophic will eventually happen.
Many organizations don't recognize the threat, and the leadership of those organizations don't necessarily take it seriously. Once they get bitten, at that time it may be too late.